So how do the most successful real estate investors find deals in this hot market? My name's Rod Cleef. I'm a host of the Lifetime Cash Flow podcast, and let's dig into that today. Now, the number one way to find deals in this hot market is to have relationships with brokers. Now, we're going to talk about a lot of other ways. Let's start with brokers. Broker relationships are critical. And so if you're interested in finding deals, develop relationships with brokers in whatever target market you're interested in. How do you find the best brokers? One way is to go on loopnet.com, and that's the commercial MLS. You go on loopnet.com and you see who is listing the most of the type and size property that you're interested in. There's always a few big dogs in every market. You contact those people and you start relationships. And remember this, my friends, commercial multifamily is a relationship business. It's a team business. If you do single family, you're not going to be able to do it you're not going to be able to do multifamily by yourself. You can do single family by yourself, and most people do, but you're not going to be able to transition into multifamily until you put a team together, and brokers are a piece of your team. Now, there's also online websites that you can utilize, like LoopNet, like I just said. There's naiglobal.com. There's commercial real estate brokerage sites like Marcus and Millichap, CB Richard Ellis, CBRE.com. There's Grubb and Ellis, okay? Those are some of the brokerage sites. I'd recommend you check those out. Put in alerts so that when a property comes up that meets your criteria, you get an alert on it. Now, I'm going to give you some other ways that people are finding deals today. One of them is Craigslist. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't know if you're a member of my big Facebook group. If you're not, you should go check it out. It's free. There's about 28,000 people on there, and just go to multifamilycommunity.com, and it's a direct link. But in there, I've seen posts from people that have bought $1 million properties on Craigslist. Okay, so don't discount that. Now, I want to give you another scenario. Let's say you're a crusty old man, maybe in your 80s, and you own a 10-unit property or a 20-unit property, and you don't like those brokers. You don't trust those brokers, okay? Where are you going to list the property for sale? How are you going to sell it? You can't even spell internet, so where are you going to put it? The newspaper. And nobody looks there anymore. So make sure you're looking in the newspaper, in whatever your submarket is. We have found deals that nobody's called on in the newspaper, so make sure you're using that. Now, the most successful students that I have and the people that I talk to on my podcast are willing to do what other people aren't willing to do. Let me give you some examples of that. In fact, I interviewed a couple of guys, Jacob Blackett and Sterling White, and on my podcast interview of them, they had just closed on a 50-unit that they found by driving around and looking for rundown properties and then doing everything they could to find those owners. And they had a 48-unit under contract that they got by calling for rent ads in Craigslist and saying, hey, you're interested in selling. So again, doing what other people aren't willing to do. I've got a student myself that pulled a list of owners that had owned in his town for 20 years, found out who lived there, but also owned some multifamily properties, and he went up and knocked on the doors of the people that owned the properties. One of them was a guy, and he went up to the door and said, hey, do you own this 6-unit over on whatever street? And the guy said yes. And he said, have you ever thought of selling it? He invited him in. He owns it. Okay. Same student, Matt, told me that he was driving by this property for literally years and finally heard me in his ear telling him to take massive action. And he went up and knocked on the door, found the 80-year-old owner that owned that place, and now he owns that one too. So again, doing what other people aren't willing to do. Another thing you can do is actually do mailers. Once you pick a market and you really like that market, I'm going to highly recommend you do a mailing campaign to that market if you know that's where you're going to buy. I'm not talking about thousands of letters. I'm talking about a very honed mailing. Most mail, if you do outbound mail, if you get a 0.5% response, that's average. If you get 1%, you're doing backflips, okay? When we do a mailer, we get a 6 to 9% response rate. I'm not exaggerating. So how does that happen? First of all, we only mail people that have owned 20 years, okay? And so it's a much smaller list, okay? And it's not thousands of people. It's even in a big city, it's maybe 200 or 300 max, okay? So 20 plus years. Now we only mail ideally, say 5 to 40 units, okay? 5 to 40 units. My handwriting is horrible. Let me give you another tip besides picking people that have mailed 20 plus years. What you're going to find if you mail commercial multifamily properties, 5 units plus, is that most of them are owned in entities. They're owned in an LLC or a corporation, okay, entity, or maybe even a limited partnership. And if you mail to the registered agent of that entity, where's that mail going to end up? So here's another thing. Now, this is doing what other people aren't willing to do. You go to the Secretary of State's website for whatever state your property is in, that your list is in that you're going to mail to, and you look up those entities and you find out who the principals are, the owners of those LLCs, and you mail them at their home address, okay? Nobody does that. And again, they're not used to getting mail at their home address for their property, so it stands out. Some other tips are handwrite the envelopes. Another one is when you type the letter, make sure you put the address of the property in the top sentence of the letter. Mailing is not a once and done thing either. You've got to do it several times, 2 or 3, 4 times a year. So you want to hit them when they're motivated. You should change up your mail as well. Maybe the first time you send a business envelope, with again, every time the envelope is handwritten, then maybe the next time you send a postcard, then maybe after that you send an invitation envelope with a letter in it. You change it up. And again, like every 2 or 3 months you mail, because it's a small list. It's maybe a couple hundred people. That's all. And if you've taken the time to break up the entity and you're mailing up their home address, and maybe you're getting their phone numbers from the LLC documents or the corporate documents as well. You might even do an outbound call campaign. Again, doing what other people aren't willing to do. You do it, you'll be a success. Let me give you a couple other tips. One is auctions. Okay, now I like auctions. I want to give you some tips about auctions. They're a great place to learn the business as well. With commercial real estate auctions, there's probably about a dozen sites, and you'll get a lot more information when you get a package on one of these properties. There's opportunity there, but let me give you 2 little tips. Number 1, be careful because they have a short due diligence fuse. And so you want to make sure there's no defects with the property. You want to be very careful when you're buying an auction property because you're doing the due diligence in advance of the auction date, and you're not even sure you're going to get that property. So you want to be careful. You want to have some extra money earmarked in case something pops up. I'd recommend you have somebody like me looking over your shoulder if it's your first deal for sure. Secondly, use a separate email address when you register on the auction websites because they'll send you tons of emails. They'll drive you crazy. But auctions are a great place to learn, and you can find deals there. The last big tip I want to give you is that when you pick a submarket, get a relationship with a residential broker. Even if you're going after 5 to 30 doors, commercial property, get a relationship with a residential broker because it's so common that a residential broker or agent will get in multifamily property and they haven't got a clue how to market it, what to do with it. But they'll get it because they've got relationships. Maybe they've sold this investor's home. He's like, well, sell my 10 unit or my 20 unit. And they don't know what to do with it. And if you've got a relationship with them and you tell them, hey, if a multifamily property hits the MLS, I'm your person. You contact me. I'll take care of you. And I can tell you, that is a ninja trick that is very powerful and very effective for finding deals other people don't see because they end up on the MLS, which is not where multifamily property is listed, is not where it should be listed. Anyway, my name is Rod Khleif. I hope you'll check out my website, rodkhleif.com. There's a lot of free material there, books and things like that that'll help you with this business. Go make it happen.